Have you ever felt like your boss was actively trying to suck the joy, the life right out of you, all while blaming invisible enemies? What if I told you a story about a boss who weaponized your health, your family's well-being to pad his own pockets, and how we, the burnt out, the barely hanging on, decided to fight back? This isn't just a story about a bad boss. It's about the kind of corporate villain who blames a 9% hike in health insurance for freezing your wages, then tries to make you the victim. Prepare yourself for the tale of Mr. Thorne, the man who turned our bustling office in a mid-sized city into a pressure cooker, and how his reign of terror ultimately blew up in his face. My name is Alex, and for years I'd thought I had a pretty good handle on toxic workplaces. I'd seen my share of micromanagers and penny pinchers, but nothing, I mean nothing, prepared me for Mr. Thorne. I joined Evergreen Solutions in late 2023, a marketing associate with a decent salary and the promise of growth. The office felt vibrant, a hive of activity where the scent of fresh coffee usually mingled with the hum of productivity. We were a mid-sized company, known for innovative tech solutions, and things felt stable, even good, as the new year dawned. My cubicle, nestled between Ben, our resident tech wizard, and Maria, a marketing strategist with a knack for calm under pressure, felt like home. Little did I know, a storm was brewing, one that would redefine bad boss for all of us. The first hint of trouble wasn't a roar, but a chilling whisper. It came in early March of the next year, 2024, during one of Mr. Thorne's mandatory transparency meetings. Thorne, a man whose suits always looked a size too tight and whose smile never quite reached his eyes, stood at the front of the room. He cleared his throat, a theatrical gesture that usually preceded a pronouncement of some new, overly complicated initiative. "Team," he began, his voice dripping with what he probably thought was empathy, "I have some challenging news." My stomach tightened. We'd been hearing whispers about rising costs, but nothing concrete. "As you know," he continued, adjusting his tie, "the economic landscape is fluid. We're facing unprecedented challenges, especially with the projected 9% increase in health insurance premiums for the coming fiscal year." A collective groan, barely audible, rippled through the room. A 9% hike was no joke. It meant our company's costs would skyrocket, potentially eating into our bottom line. "Therefore," he announced, pausing for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping over our faces, "effective immediately, all employee wages will be frozen for the foreseeable future. We must tighten our belts, make sacrifices to absorb this unavoidable burden and ensure Evergreen's long-term stability." My heart sank faster than a lead balloon. A wage freeze? Just as the cost of everything else, from groceries to gas, seemed to be climbing higher than a skyscraper? My mind raced to my own budget, the tightrope walk of bills and savings. I glanced around. Maria, a single mom, looked visibly pale, her hands gripping her coffee mug so tightly her knuckles were white. Ben, usually unflappable, had a bewildered furrow in his brow. Thorne went on, spouting corporate platitudes about shared sacrifice and navigating choppy waters together. But it felt less like shared sacrifice and more like we were being sacrificed to him. He painted himself as the hero, the one making the tough decisions to save us all, while conveniently ignoring that our last performance reviews had been glowing, our profits steady. It wasn't the health insurance increase itself that was the problem. It was how he was exploiting it, using it as a convenient scapegoat for what felt like pure greed. This wasn't just a challenge. It was an insult, a direct hit to our financial security and our morale. But that was just the beginning. The wage freeze was just the opening act in Mr. Thorne's grand, self-serving symphony. The very next week, he initiated what he called Project Streamline, which, in plain English, meant cutting every possible corner he could find, regardless of the impact on our daily work or sanity. First went the small things, the little comforts that made office life bearable. The good coffee, the expensive brand everyone loved, was replaced by a watery, generic blend that tasted like dirty dishwater. The communal snacks, a small but appreciated perk, vanished entirely. "Every penny counts, team," he declared in an email, especially with that unavoidable 9% health insurance hike looming. It was always that hike, always the excuse. We started bringing our own coffee, our own snacks, feeling like high schoolers sneaking forbidden treats. It was petty, yes, but it chipped away at our morale, a constant, irritating buzz in the background. Then came the bigger cuts. The office cleaning schedule was reduced from 3 times a week to once, leaving the bathrooms, well, let's just say they became a test of courage. Office supplies dwindled. We started hoarding pens and sticky notes like they were gold. Sarah, a new mom in accounting, whose desk was piled high with paperwork, mentioned how she sometimes had to wait days for a new toner cartridge. "It slows everything down," she'd sighed, running a hand through her hair. And then Thorne asks why my reports are taking longer. Her eyes were often shadowed, and the stress was starting to show on her face. Her son, little Leo, had just started daycare, and the wage freeze meant every dollar was stretched thinner than a rubber band in a tug-of-war. The thought of any unexpected cost, especially a health-related one, was a constant cloud over her. But the real gut punch came a few weeks later. Thorne called another all-hands meeting, this time with a grim-faced HR representative by his side. Due to our ongoing efforts to navigate the economic headwinds and, of course, the significant health insurance premium increase, he announced, his voice devoid of any genuine regret, "We've had to make some difficult decisions regarding resource allocation." My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what was coming. "Effective next month," he continued, "we will be consolidating some roles to maximize efficiency. This means we will not be backfilling open positions, and existing teams will be expected to absorb additional responsibilities. In short, increased workload, no extra staff, same frozen wages." A collective sigh escaped the room, heavy with resignation. Maria whispered, "He's literally making us pay for the hike with our sweat." The metaphorical weight of the company was being dumped squarely on our shoulders, and we were expected to carry it with a smile. The air in the room grew thick with a mix of anger and despair, a palpable sense of injustice hanging over us. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, or the utter lack of. The Project Streamline quickly morphed into a full-blown reign of terror, a slow, a daunting squeeze that left everyone gasping. After the wage freeze and the increased workload, Mr. Thorne decided to turn up the heat on accountability, which translated to oppressive, soul-crushing micromanagement. He introduced new, absurdly detailed daily activity logs. Every task, every phone call, every bathroom break had to be meticulously logged with start and end times. "Efficiency is paramount," he'd barked in an email, especially when facing such significant cost increases. His obsession with tracking our every move was almost comical, if it wasn't systematically destroying our sanity. He'd stalk the aisles, a clipboard in hand, scrutinizing screens, clocking bathroom trips, even timing coffee breaks. "Alex," he'd once said, leaning over my shoulder, his breath smelling faintly of stale coffee, "I see you logged 7 minutes for that email. Are you sure it couldn't have been 5? My heart raced as I tried to explain the complexities of crafting a client message. It felt like being back in elementary school, but with far higher stakes. Daniel, a usually jovial graphic designer who always had a witty comment for every situation, started looking gaunt. His bright, colorful shirts were replaced by muted tones, and his infectious laughter was replaced by a quiet, strained silence. I once saw him hunched over his desk, eyes red-rimmed, trying to explain to Thorne why a design iteration took an extra hour. "The client requested changes, sir," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper. Thorne simply tapped his watch. "Time is money, Daniel, especially when we're battling these exorbitant healthcare costs. You need to be more proactive." Daniel just nodded, defeated. It wasn't just Daniel. Everyone felt it. The constant gaze, the implied threat. We became automatons, focused on meeting impossible timeframes. Creativity suffocated under the weight of surveillance. My internal monologue became a constant stream of anxiety. Am I working fast enough? Did I spend too long on that? Is he watching me right now? The joy of problem solving, of collaborative effort, had evaporated, replaced by a suffocating pressure. As if micromanagement wasn't enough, Thorne decided to add a dash of favoritism to his toxic brew. He had a small clique of favorites, employees who seemed to spend more time fawning over him and agreeing with his every decree than actually working. Suddenly, these sycophants started getting all the plum assignments, the high-profile projects that offered visibility and potential for future growth. The rest of us, the actual workhorses, were buried under a mountain of tedious, high-volume tasks with impossible deadlines. Maria, who was exceptionally talented and always delivered stellar results, found herself. It made the health insurance hike, which he'd used as his primary excuse, a bitter, agonizing irony. We watched Sarah, usually so composed, break down. And in that moment, something shifted in the office. The fear that had kept us silent began to transform into a simmering, collective outrage. We had to do something. For Sarah, for Ben, for ourselves, and for every other employee who had been crushed under the weight of Thorne's lies. The breaking point had been reached. Sarah's desperate tears, Ben's unjust firing, and the constant, suffocating pressure had finally forged a collective resolve. We couldn't let Thorne get away with this, not after seeing the real-life consequences of his lies. Maria, her voice steadier than I'd ever heard it, looked at me. "We have to expose him, Alex, for all of us." I nodded, my own fear now overshadowed by a burning sense of injustice. The quiet, analytical part of me kicked in. We needed more than whispers. We needed undeniable proof. Over the next 2 weeks, operating like a covert unit, Maria and I, along with a few other trusted colleagues who had witnessed Thorne's abuses firsthand, began to meticulously gather evidence. We worked late, sending encrypted messages, meeting in hushed tones during lunch breaks. We pored over internal company reports, cross-referenced expense accounts, and carefully pieced together the fragments of information Ben had uncovered. It was like putting together a giant, infuriating puzzle. We found more than just the executive bonus memo. We discovered that the discretionary fund was being used for lavish personal expenses disguised as client entertainment and executive development retreats at 5-star resorts. We even found a subtly worded HR document that explicitly stated the actual health insurance premium increase had been successfully negotiated down to a mere 3.5%, effective from the previous quarter, a full month before Thorne had announced the 9% unavoidable burden and implemented the wage freeze. He hadn't just exaggerated, he'd outright fabricated a major chunk of his excuse. Armed with a mountain of irrefutable evidence, emails, expense reports, internal financial summaries, and that damning HR document, we knew we couldn't go to Thorne directly. He'd just twist it, threaten us, or find a way to discredit us. We needed to go higher, straight to the top. Evergreen Solutions had a small, independent board of directors, usually just a rubber stamp for Thorne's decisions. But there was one member, Miss Anya Sharma, known for her integrity and a sharp eye for corporate governance. She was our last hope. We compiled all our findings into a comprehensive anonymous packet, detailing every instance of Thorne's deception, the impact on employee morale, the unjust firings, and the outright financial fraud. We included Sarah's story, anonymously, as a stark example of the human cost. The day we delivered the packet to Miss Sharma's assistant felt like walking on eggshells. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs. We slipped it into her mailbox with a discreet note requesting her urgent attention. The wait was agonizing. Every email notification, every phone call made me jump. Had she seen it? Would she dismiss it? Would Thorne somehow find out it was us? For 3 long, anxious days, the tension in the office was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Maria and I exchanged nervous glances, wondering if we'd made a terrible mistake. Then, on the 4th day, the office received an urgent all-staff email from Miss Sharma herself, requesting an unscheduled, mandatory meeting at the end of the day. The email was short, formal, and offered no explanation. Thorne looked unusually pale that afternoon, pacing his office, barking orders at his assistant. He had no idea what was coming. At 4:45 p.m., the entire staff gathered in the large conference room. The air crackled with a silent, unspoken dread. Mr. Thorne strode in, his usual swagger replaced by a nervous energy. He tried to project an air of authority, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his microphone. "All right, team," he began, his voice higher than usual. "Miss Sharma has called this meeting to discuss some future strategic initiatives." He glanced nervously at the door, expecting Miss Sharma to walk in any moment. But it wasn't Miss Sharma who walked in. Instead, 2 stern-faced individuals in dark suits, flanked by Miss Sharma herself, entered the room. One of them held a briefcase. Thorne visibly flinched. Miss Sharma walked to the front, her face grim. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for arranging this. However, this meeting is not about future strategic initiatives." She turned to face Thorne directly, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Thorne, we have received a substantial amount of information regarding your management practices and financial reporting here at Evergreen Solutions." Thorne's face drained of all color. He stammered, "Miss Sharma, I'm not sure what you're referring to. We've been diligently working through these challenging economic times, making the necessary sacrifices to mitigate the 9% health insurance premium hike." Miss Sharma cut him off, her voice like steel. "There was no 9% health insurance premium hike, Mr. Thorne. Our records and a signed agreement from our insurance provider, dated 2 months before your announcement, clearly show the increase was negotiated down to 3.5%. A gasp rippled through the room. Maria squeezed my hand, her eyes wide. "Furthermore," Miss Sharma continued, "we have evidence of significant executive bonuses and misuse of company funds for personal gain, all while employees were told to tighten their belts and their wages were frozen under false pretenses." The 2 individuals in suits stepped forward. "Mr. Thorne," one of them stated, his voice calm but authoritative, "we represent the board of directors, and we've been authorized to conduct a full internal investigation into these matters. Effectively immediately, you are suspended pending the outcome of this investigation. Please collect your personal belongings and escort yourself out of the premises." Thorne stood there, utterly dumbfounded, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The carefully constructed facade of the tough but fair boss, the savior navigating choppy waters, crumbled into dust. All his lies, all his petty cruelty, laid bare for everyone to see. He tried to protest, to bluster, but Miss Sharma simply gestured to the 2 men. They politely but firmly escorted him from the room, past the stunned faces of his employees. The silence in the room was electric, a mixture of shock, relief, and a profound sense of justice. He was gone, the worst boss ever, exposed and defeated. In the days and weeks that followed, the office felt like a completely different place. The air was lighter, the smiles were genuine, and the hum of productivity returned, this time fueled by genuine collaboration, not fear.
Thorne's investigation revealed even more layers of his deceit, leading to his eventual termination and, thankfully, some legal repercussions for financial misconduct. Miss Sharma took a much more active role in the company, ensuring that the team felt heard and respected. She initiated a comprehensive review of all policies, prioritizing employee well-being. The wage freeze was lifted and fair raises were implemented, along with a commitment to transparency regarding benefits and company finances. Sarah's family received assistance with Leo's medical bills, and Maria finally got the flexibility she needed. Even Ben was brought back, his redundant role suddenly deemed essential once again. This whole ordeal, from the insidious wage freeze blamed on a phantom 9% health insurance hike to the gut-wrenching layoffs and the final satisfying confrontation, taught me a powerful lesson. We often feel powerless against toxic bosses, especially when they wield corporate jargon and economic fears like weapons. We think we have to just suffer in silence, to keep our heads down and hope it passes. But that's a lie. When injustice becomes unbearable, when the truth is staring you in the face, standing together, meticulously gathering evidence, and finding the courage to speak up can make all the difference. It's not easy, and it carries risks, but the alternative, letting someone like Thorne crush your spirit and exploit your dedication, is far worse. Prioritizing their mental health, your dignity, and your worth is a necessity. Don't ever let a boss, no matter how powerful they seem, make you believe otherwise. This story isn't just about a bad boss. It's about finding your voice and reclaiming your workplace.